I wonder if you've ever been on the receiving end of an act of love. Before Daniel was born, I was a primary school teacher, and I taught the most awesome kids in the world. And they were year 2, and one morning, a lovely girl, she came to the classroom and she handed me a beautiful flower, and she said, "Mrs. Kirby, I thought of you when I saw this." Man, my heart was like, oh, that's so nice. Her simple act of love made my day brighter. She said to me, "Now, Mrs. Kirby, you have to get a glass of water so it doesn't die." I was like, okay, yes, I'll do that. And so I got a vase, and throughout the day, I looked at that flower and I just smiled because it was such a simple act of love that changed my day. Another class that I taught, I had read a story and I had to draw a picture, and I'm not a very good artist, so I said to the kids, well, here's a dog. Doesn't really look like a dog, but here's one. And they said to me, "Mrs. Kirby, that's the best dog I've ever seen." And I thought, oh, that's so nice, because I'm not good at drawing. And honestly, it probably didn't even look like a dog. But their words of encouragement just gave me so much joy, and their simple act of love just changed my whole day. But maybe you've showed God's kindness to someone else. One time at the supermarket not too long ago, there was a man on a mobility scooter and he needed something off the top shelf. And so I said, "Hey, can I help you with that?" And he said, "Yes, please." And so I grabbed it off the shelf for him. Another time, a few years ago when I was at university, I had to take the bus into school every day, and my friend forgot her bus card. And so I said, "I'll get that one for you today." And my simple act of love for her meant she didn't have to pay for her bus trip herself. She didn't have to wait for the next one while she got some money out. I could just give it to her. So these are simple acts of love that you might be able to do to help make a difference in people's lives. How often do we go through life and see a need that somebody has but do nothing about it? This video, even though its main focus is on acts of kindness, actually represents loving actions towards others to make a change in someone's life. How cool would it be if we could do the same for others? We probably do this in many ways throughout the course of our days, and it might be as simple and powerful as a smile to a stranger or paying for someone's coffee. Currently, we're in a time of preparing for self-denial. Transforming a life to transform the future is this year's focus for the appeal. We are being asked to show a genuine act of love to help meet the needs of people around the world and to share with them God's love in a very practical way. The passage that we're exploring this morning is in 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 to 18, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation of the Bible. So 1 John 3, 16 to 18. It says, "We know what real love is, because Jesus gave up his life for us. So we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. If someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let us show the truth by our actions." In this passage, John is encouraging Christians to demonstrate God's love to those in need by loving them in practical ways. And that's John's message to his original listeners, but we can also learn something from that today too. And that's that we as Christians should demonstrate God's love to those in need by loving them in practical ways. Ultimately, it is about sacrificial love. So the passage that I read from 1 John is a letter that was written by a man named John between 85 or 95 AD. He wrote this letter after he wrote the Gospel of John. He was in Jesus' inner circle and a loved disciple and follower of Jesus. In fact, John was a follower of Jesus Christ from the earliest days of his ministry. The people who heard this letter were believers. There is no mention of names or places, making this letter universal for believers, and it would have been a circular letter sent to Christians in several places across the Holy Land. John wrote this letter to clear up any false teaching that had been going on, saying that Jesus was not fully God or fully human. So John wrote to expose those false teachings and to give assurance to believers of the certainty of their faith. So let's paint a picture of this passage for those who originally heard it. Who loves them, what love is, and why they should love others. They've received love. and should be passing it on because God loved them first. At the beginning of 1 John in chapter 3, it says, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." God is a loving Father and gave his followers the role of being his children. He loves his children and loves them before anything else. John wrote later in this letter in chapter 4 that we love because he first loved us. God gave his children the ability to give and feel love. Because of the love that has been received by God, his children are encouraged to pass it on to others. In verse 11 of chapter 3, it says, "For this is the message you have heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Without love, it is impossible to love others." Father God has equipped his followers, his children, with the ability to love because of what he has given to them. God showed the ultimate expression of love with his son Jesus, who laid down his life for everybody. What a sacrifice to make, simply so that it can be known how much he loves his children and how far he's willing to go. Love is shown in Jesus. A person's life is their most precious possession. This example of love is one to copy. We are beloved children of God because of the love that the Father has for us. So the main idea in that passage is that Christians should demonstrate God's love in practical ways. And a simple way that you can apply this to your life is with a simple phrase that I have been taught. And it goes like this: love is for the benefit of others. It desires to give, even at the expense of self. I'll say that again so you can write it down. Love is for the benefit of others. It desires to give, even at the expense of self. This phrase, or definition of love, is an easy reminder of how to do what John is writing about. This phrase has stuck with me over the past few years because it shows that love is deeper than just a feeling. It's saying that it actually requires something of me. And some of you may have heard it already. And that's what I would like you to take away with you this morning, if nothing else, that love is for the benefit of others. It desires to give, even at the expense of self. So love is for the benefit of others. God loved us so much that he sent his son Jesus to die for us. He is our inspiration and our source for love. John writes, "We know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. So we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters." What is actually being asked here of Christians is to be willing. Be willing to love for the benefit of others. Jesus is God's gift of love to each of us, the ultimate example of the extent of God's love. Him dying on the cross is the answer to the definition of love in itself. We can risk loving others because we know that we are loved by God. Our brother or sister can also be anybody, not just somebody that is directly related to us. Love is for the benefit of others. Now, what love might be for some of you is driving your children to their sports games early on a Saturday morning on the other side of town. That's you loving your children because it's for their benefit and you desire to get them to the game. You are denying yourself of a sleep-in, if that's what you're after, and you're denying yourself the warmth and comfort of your own home. But you get to see your children play the game and hopefully they win. And then you celebrate because they've played so well. Amazing. And then you do it all again next week. That is crazy. But it's because you love them. And I was one of those kids once, with my parents driving me across town to play netball, and they did it because they loved me. And those were the cold winter Palmerston North mornings. That was a practical expression of love that benefited me because I got to play the netball game. A simple example of love in action. Because love is for the benefit of others, it also desires to give. John writes, "If someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person?" The love of God is the willingness to surrender something that has value for our own life to enrich the life of another. In this verse, it talks about having enough money to live well, having all that we need. And so love is about the desire to give to others. Maybe it's making a meal for somebody who's going through a tough time. Or maybe helping somebody move house. Or even letting someone cry on your shoulder and be a listening ear. Maybe God's talking to you right now about stepping up in this area. I challenge you to think of what you could do if that's the case. You might have heard the saying, see a need, fill a need. Well, there's two parts to that. The first is that you have to see the need. How often do you see someone who might need help, but you don't do anything about it? When you see someone who needs help, what's your response? Is it to walk away and pretend you haven't seen them? Maybe that's one of the times when you pull out your phone and you just walk past like this and you just pretend to talk so that you don't have to bother them or talk to them. Maybe you've wanted to help, but you didn't know how to. Or maybe you've tried and you got a negative response back. But there's need all around us and we just have to see it. The second part is that when we've seen that need, we should desire to offer support if we are in a position to, or at least take it somewhere where it can be supported. If we see someone in need and refuse to share or shut down our feelings towards those in need, then we're not actually giving life to those who are suffering or living without. Ask God to open your eyes to see what he sees. Love is for the benefit of others. Love desires to give. What next? Well, love is denying yourself. In verse 18 it says, "Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let us show the truth by our actions." This is about sacrificial love. It is hard to deny yourself of something. It requires giving over something that we might not actually want to get rid of. It could include time or money, maybe possessions, and it's all about sacrifice. At the heart of love is sacrifice. Actions speak louder than words, and love is not only shown through words but through action. In the movie Finding Nemo, for example, Marlin gave up his security and comfort to go and find his son Nemo in the ocean because he loved him so much and he risked his life to get him back. And in Toy Story 3, spoiler alert, Andy gives up his toys to a young girl named Bonnie, and he loves those toys, but because love is for the benefit of others and desires to give, he passes those toys on to her and denies himself. And in Beauty and the Beast, Belle stayed with the Beast so that her father could be released. But because she loved her father, she desired to keep him safe, even at the expense of her own life being locked up. These may be seen as children's movies, although I enjoy them now as an adult too. The principles still apply to us. Mother Teresa was a woman who showed God's love in very practical ways. She devoted her life to helping those in need, and she became a symbol of charitable, selfless work. And you may know the story about the Donut Girls. They were women who displayed love. They put their lives at risk to go to the front lines in the war to serve donuts to the men. Many recall that this simple act of love reminded them of home and got them through the tough times. The women desired to love these men and denied themselves of their safety. Love and action should be inseparable. God's love is for the benefit of others. It desires to give, even at the expense of self, and so should ours. Loving in practical ways can really make a difference in people's lives. It can be transformational. One way that you can love practically is to plan to give in this year's self-denial appeal. We've already heard this morning that 1 week's salary is what is asked of us to give in the appeal. But I ask that you talk with God, pray with him about what he wants you to give. It's really important that we wait and listen to what he has to say. To deny ourselves of something is hard, and it isn't always what we want to do, to sacrifice. But God has called us to love one another in practical ways. And while some of us like to bake or prepare a meal for others or clean somebody's house so that they don't have to, we are being asked to give money to help the work of the Salvation Army and what God is already doing in the lives and communities of people across the world to our brothers and sisters in need. To live a life that aligns with what I've talked about today, to love for the benefit of others, to desire to give, even at the expense of self, then we need to allow God to open up our eyes, to help us see how He sees. Shortly, we are going to sing the song Hosanna, and there are some lines in there that say, "Open up my eyes to the things unseen. Show me how to love like you have loved me." While we sing this song, my prayer is that God would start or continue to open our eyes to see the things that He sees, to love like He has loved us. Hopefully, you will have written down somewhere by now that love is for the benefit of others. It desires to give, even at the expense of self. And I challenge you to list 4 things that you could do to love somebody practically. It might be bake for someone, buy a coffee for someone else, encourage a stranger, pray with someone. Maybe it's even to sign up to serve on a team here in this church. I challenge you to choose one of those things and do one for each week, for the next 4 weeks. Love each other in practical ways. Maybe you want to share your list with somebody so that they can keep you accountable. Love is for the benefit of others. It desires to give, even at the expense of self.